In our previous episode, Charlie Ireland and I talked about our differing experiences as an engineer and an architect, beginning our second act as professional consultants. Today, I'm taking over the host role, and I'm joined by Tom Bane and Jessica Thiebout. Like Charlie and me, Tom and Jessica are an engineer and an architect, respectively, but that's where the similarities end. Both Tom and Jessica are building enclosure consultants, and both are in the prime of their careers, building their reputations as experts in their field. Good afternoon and welcome to the Build and Revitalize podcast. I'm Eric Murrell, your host. Today I have Tom Bane and Jessica Thiebout. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hi, Eric.
Jessica.
Hi, Eric.
So, Tom.
Yes?
Can I call you Tom or is it Thomas?
You can call me Tom, boss.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes. And I am Eric Murrell, the group leader of the building materials group. And both of these guys, folks, clowns, work for me. So we're talking today a little bit about career path and kind of how we got to where we are. I'm interested to know a little bit more about how you guys, got here, because all of us kind of came to this career by a different route. Tom, why don't you go first? Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Well, it's an interesting story. I definitely fell into this position. I grew up in Northern Virginia doing normal high school stuff, generally was inclined towards math and sciences, and did pretty well in my SATs. So, all right, I'm going to go to the University of Virginia, UVA, go Wahoos. I started in the civil engineering program because, well, my dad was a civil engineer, my brother was a civil engineer, my mom was a lawyer, but lawyers are bad, so... In civil engineering, I started getting into it, and there were many things I liked. Statics was really fun, so kind of generally structural engineering-ish things. But as I got into it, I noticed that a lot of the things that I was dealing with weren't quite as theoretical or didn't have as much basis in theory as I thought coming in. If there was a concrete beam design, it was always based on, just some sort of empirical best fit model that someone in a lab generated. It didn't come from first principles. It was just came up off a graph. And that didn't always sit well with me. It didn't make the work very intuitive, so I didn't necessarily enjoy that aspect of it. But I said, well, whatever. I did transportation stuff, did geotechnical, structural engineering, that sort of thing. And I was like, all right, well, about to graduate. I don't have a particular idea about where I want to go. So let's see, at the time I was dating a woman who would become my wife, who was a year ahead of me, and she was out in Pasadena, California for her PhD. So I said, all right, well, I guess I'm moving from Northern Virginia to Los Angeles. All right, okay, so what do you do? So I found a list of the 250 best places to work, and I just went down that list. And I said, all right, who of these engineering firms have offices in Los Angeles? And I just started kind of cold calling them, saying, hi, do you want to hire me? And most people said no. But I did find a couple of takers, one of which was Simpson, Gumberson, Hager. Going in, I thought that this was a structural engineering firm. They did do structural engineering, but this particular position was not necessarily for structural engineering. So I must have said something during the interview that the head of the West Coast, his ears pricked up, and he kind of looked up at me, and he stopped for a minute and paused and said, Now, Tom, you understand that what we're talking about here is building technology. It's waterproofing. And I was dumbfounded. I didn't know that, but I just smiled, looked blankly ahead, and yeah, absolutely. No, totally. Waterproofing. Yeah. and that's how I got my first job there. So as I'm getting into this, I realized about 2 years in, this could be like a forever thing. It's people talk about waterproofing. It doesn't sound all that glamorous, but it's very useful. Everyone needs it. It rains everywhere. And the thing I always really liked was that there was always something new to learn. With building enclosures, there's always a new product, a new assembly. different types of waterproofing, different types of cladding, a new window system. You've got decks, you've got roofs, you've got old buildings, you've got new buildings, you've got buildings that were meant to last 100 years and buildings that were meant to last 5, and they all have their own individual features that make them all unique. And that's just a really neat part of my job.
Yeah, obviously. So, Jessica, could you more slowly and methodically respond to that same question? When did you know that this was going to be your thing?
Much like Tom said, I fell into this. It was definitely this is not what I'm going to do when I grow up. For me, I also was good at math and probably accounting and sciences and all those things, but I was very afraid of living in a cube farm for my career. And my mom had worked for a computer engineering company, but I took that as all engineering and therefore was like, nope, I'm not doing that. And then I actually took a gap year between high school and in my freshman year of college before gap years were actually a thing. Went to Germany and Denmark for a while. And then when I came back, I was like, ooh, architecture, pretty buildings. And so I applied to the only in-state architecture public school at U of M and was like, okay, now I'm going to U of M. Little did I know that that's actually quite an achievement. And so I went to undergrad for architecture at U of M, and how I actually ended up in this career is just, sometimes fate has its way of things and pure happenstance. I was going into my senior year and was in Ann Arbor looking for an apartment. I was there with my sisters, and we had just looked at some place, and we were on the sidewalk talking about the apartment. And this girl walks up to me and she's like, did I hear that you're in architecture school? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, I'm actually just moving here as a first year grad student. It's cheaper to have a 2-bedroom and share rent, and we know each other's schedule. Would you be interested in looking at a 2-bedroom? Roommate was great. We got along fantastically, and turns out that somebody in her studio was working for a firm in Chicago. Started telling me about the firm, and he's like, well, we do high-rise restoration. We're in the field. We do design details, but we're rarely in the office and not really design. And I was like, that sounds great. Let me know if they're hiring. And he comes back from spring break and is like, they're waiting for your resume. And so I had actually gone to Prague that summer, my senior year. So the day before I'm flying out, I drive to Chicago for an interview and then hightail it back to Ann Arbor. Had the interview and then was regularly checking the internet cafes to see if I was getting a job offer. So I had a job when I got back from Prague. And I did. And so shortly after getting back and finishing graduating, I moved to Chicago and started a career in what I knew as high-rise restoration. So it wasn't until several years later that I realized building enclosure or building enclosure consulting was actually a thing. I knew it was consulting, but yeah, if you had asked me for the first 6 years of my career, it was high-rise restoration. So working on, my regular building that I worked on every summer was 42 stories. You get beautiful views of Chicago from 42 stories in the air. Highest building I'd been on was 55 stories before. Like I say, I worked there for about 6 years before deciding to move to Texas. I had done my master's degree in that time at Texas A&M and decided I was ready for some warm weather. Ended up finding a job in Houston and moved there. Lived there for about 6.5, 7 years. 5 years ago, decided to move back home and ended up looking for a job posting in Grand Rapids, and that's where I found SME.
I knew all that. No, actually, I did not. Thank you.
I like high-rise work.
High-rise work?
Yeah,
I
it's
do
fun.
too.
I like swing stages.
I do too. I prefer swing stages to boom lifts.
So, we've kind of established this idea that, there isn't a curriculum for building enclosure consulting, and Jessica's path might have been a little more traditional in that, she got a degree in architecture. And contrary to what you might think, Thomas, there are some people who do learn about waterproofing in school.
Well, there are like 2 programs in school.
Yeah. Okay. So But when you look at what you do now, how did your education prepare you for what it is we are expected to do for our clients?
Well, it probably goes for a lot of different um, professions out there, but the ability to communicate with others, to write clearly, to explain yourself. In school, I was a big fan of physics. I liked where it came from. It was these immutable, universal laws that through one or two steps from there, you get how quickly a ball falls from the ground, or what happens when two billiard balls hit each other on a pool table, or what happens as a satellite goes around the sun. There are very definitive sort of principles and rules and laws that guided how things interacted with each other. So within physics, one of the things that we're always looking for, or within building enclosure consulting, so one of the things that we're always looking for is what's known as moisture migration. It's how little water molecules in the air migrate through otherwise solid materials. And all of that information, all the rules that govern that is based in physics and to a lesser degree, chemistry and material science. And how different walls and different materials, when stacked in a certain way, can lead to these conditions where water in the air just decides to collect somewhere in the building. And that can cause mold and all sorts of other different problems. It can cause bricks over time to get wetter. And in this cold climate, they can freeze with that water inside them. That water, because of how chemistry works, the little water molecules, they go from a liquid into a solid and expand slightly, and that expansion force of that water freezing causes extreme internal pressures inside your brick, for example, that cause it to spall out and then fall from the building. Something that's very, very important if you're building a tall building, as it turns out. So that background in physics, it's kind of this underlying current of how the world works.
Any comment?
I mean, my answer is it didn't. Like that. So much of this career is learned in the field doing the job. I mean, my building materials classes, some of the more detailed classes, technical classes help because you get an understanding for how buildings go together. But it's not really until you get out into the field and start seeing that, those lines you're drawing in CAD actually have material thickness, and you can't put 6 lines in a, inside corner and expect those materials to stack and not get damaged as you put a window in, or, things like that. But I think a lot of this job is learned in the field. In school, you learn things like presentation, how to, formulate a report, even though my first boss, very much pulled me aside and said, we need to work on your writing skills. I very much chose a career avoiding writing, and now I write reports for a living.
You're stealing my answers.
But yeah, so school teaches you, basics of using computers and presenting and those kind of things. But the rest of it, I think, is very much experience-based. And, once you've seen something fail once, you can apply that to failures in the future and those kind of things.
Do you see a difference between consulting and traditional practice? Have you had the opportunity to see what the other side is like?
I've never worked for the other side, but it's definitely more stable than at least architecture firms. Architecture firms are pretty notorious
So
for...
you're saying consulting is more stable?
Consulting is more stable than architecture work, architecture firms. I have seen plenty of times where architecture firms will get a big project. They hire on 100 people for the big project. Big project wraps up. They lay off 125. And so it's always that you're counting on that next big project. Whereas consulting work, especially... So I started in restoration, moved to Texas, and really got into more new construction. And those two things actually are kind of opposites in the cycle of construction. With when the economy's booming, there's a lot of new construction, and there's quality assurance site visits to make sure things are being installed properly at that time. versus when things start to slow down, people start maintaining their buildings. And so there's that not as much of a fear of a recession. It's more recession proof, I guess I could say, is that there is still work to be done in a recession. It just changes what that work is.
Thomas?
To me, the biggest difference between consulting and what would have been my likely other career path, which was probably going to be something like structural engineering, is building enclosure consultants are not a commodity by any stretch of the imagination. In Indianapolis.
Could you rephrase that, only make it a little louder?
So one of the really neat things about being an enclosure consultant is that our services are not a commodity. No one does this like we do it. There are some people who dabble in it, some people who have some, expertise, but it's not really their main gig. For us, we deal with building enclosures. We don't do the repairs, so you know that we're not invested in an answer. We're not looking to find a repair when one isn't necessary. We're just there to give the best advice that we can. If you don't hire me, there are a couple other people in Indianapolis who are going to be competent, but it's not like you can just open the phone book and find them. You have to know who those people are in order to find them.
So you both have been in this a while. Do you have favorite projects that really stand out? I mean, not just let's open it to your whole career. What have you done that you really...
For me, I enjoyed the restoration projects, the existing building projects. You get called in to problem solve. I do tell clients, I rarely get a call when things are going well. We are sometimes bad news bears, but they've usually had a problem that's been going on a while. And so that's why they're reaching out, they've tried something, it hasn't worked. And so there's that problem solving, that thinking part of it that I enjoy. And so as far as kind of restoration projects, I've been involved in a couple reskin projects where we've removed the exterior of the cladding of the building and designed a new weather barrier and cladding system. And I like leak chasing. Again, it's the problem solving, and there's always an abundance of leaks, including this building that I have not leak chased yet. But I enjoy the leak chasing. Again, it's the problem solving.
Yeah, I generally agree, but also disagree completely. Leak chasing is always fun because it's like unraveling a mystery. But I would say that most of my career is probably not the restoration project. It's more on the new construction side, the contemporary construction. I'm a much bigger fan of that, mainly because we have drawings that are going to be accurate. With a lot of these old buildings, it's like, oh, you remove a brick and what's this steel doing? There's no steel. What? That's not who put that in there? And big kind of head scratcher moments, but like, I don't know what's going on there. But with new construction, it's much, much easier. It's like, I know exactly what I'm going to find behind this wall, and it's much more understandable, and you're able to see the whole picture. So I'm a big fan of what's called building enclosure commissioning, which is where we're brought in on the front end, during the design phase. And, we go through the drawings, and the architects will have some details prepared, and we're able to come in and basically do a peer review of those drawings and those details. And, using that information and understanding the capabilities and limitations of various subcontractors that are going to be doing this work. And we're able to come up with details that are more forgiving of installation error. So things that not foolproof, because there's no such thing as foolproof. Create a more foolproof device and the world creates a better fool. But coming up with those sorts of solutions that are forward-thinking and help avert problems so that your client, the owner of the building, the contractor, the architect, everyone can simply move on to the next project.
It's leak chasing before the building has a chance to leak.
Yes.
It's easy. It's much easier to address those issues when they're still in construction. And that's where I think having both sides of the story helps too, because when you've seen things fail in a built building, then you can apply that to like, I know you don't think you need an NDAM, but you do. This is why, and you can stop those before they become an issue.
It's like the movie Minority Report, the precogs and things. I'd like to say I'm Tom Cruise, but I'm pretty sure I'm one of those people in that vat.
Gee, a movie reference. I only wish I'd seen it. What's the hard part of consulting?
We're bad news bears. We don't generally provide happy news.
I disagree. Yeah, this is why I like new construction. You come beforehand, it's not bad news, it's good news. Oh, thank you for stopping that.
I think that's true. We are, for many folks, we're the harbingers of bad tidings when somebody sees fit to bring us in on a project. Someone's going to have to get some bad news. Or on the commissioning side, it actually is a little easier. Occasionally we do get personalities who are reluctant to take advice.
Yeah, there's definitely a subset of designers who feel personally attacked if you suggest that their details is anything less than, anything less 100%. Than the next version of sliced bread or something.
Yeah. I have found over the last 10 years too, like, I feel like when you're out doing QA visits or testing, things like that, on new construction, 10 years ago, there was a lot more pushback. Like, this is a nuisance. You're slowing the schedule, you're wasting time, that kind of thing. And I would say within the last few years, I think contractors have started to realize the value of not having to come back. It takes one project going badly before, and all of a sudden they kind of understand the value. And so in recent years, we've been a part of the team versus a few years before that. It was more of the owner is making us do this, get it done. I don't want to hear about it. Better pass, that kind of thing. And I think the attitudes have changed within the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the industry has gotten used to the idea of enclosure consulting. So it's easier for them to get us involved earlier, and getting us involved earlier means it's a little easier for folks, because we're not dealing with people who are, they don't want to change their details because they've already used all their budget, or they don't, or we can't wait for this test because God help us if it goes bad. What do we do then? All the windows are in. Or so having that's kind of a benefit of being a little more well known. I think the industry is just starting to grow up.
One thing to your point about, all it takes is one project. When I first started at SME back in 2012, after having come from out west, one of the first big commissioning proposals I wrote was for a building somewhere that shall remain nameless. And it was rejected. I said, here's my scope. I'm going to review the drawings. I'm going to come out and do so many site visits and RFI reviews and blah, 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 blah. And they said, no, we don't think so. About 6 months ago, I got a call saying, hey, we've got this project that's been in litigation for 3-4 years now. We've got this leaking issue, and it's caused a big problem, and it's in the millions of dollars. And it was absolutely something I would have picked out in my drawing review. I mean, like, no, you don't want to do this. You need to cheat. This is the things that I see, day in and day out. And in fairness to this particular firm, because it was the first time that I was, writing one of these proposals, it was, young 28, 29-year-old Tom out there saying, hey, I can help. No, I promise. Just give me a bunch of money. Took a little time to build up my reputation. So I don't blame them at the time, but it's interesting that, there's a saying, pay us now or pay us later. People that don't hire waterproofing consultants, they sometimes come to regret it to the tune of 10 or 100 times what our fee would have been.
Enclosure consulting, I've always been of the opinion that enclosure consulting saves more money than it costs. There's no question that one wrong decision multiplied by 100 openings can really turn into a fiasco. So presuming there are, young people and college students and young professionals listening to us right now, if they see interest in what it is that we do, what would you recommend for them to do in order to get ready for this career?
I think we're probably getting ahead of ourselves there. If someone's interested in this, then they've probably got a real good reason. It's not usually a profession that someone just thinks of.
Well, this is sterling conversation here we're talking about. And so the sterling conversation has led them to this idea that perhaps these are the kind of people I want to work with, and I want to do the cool things that they do, and I want to, be successful like they are.
Couple things. The initial, like I mentioned before, the feeling like a misfit, like, you've finished your degree in architecture, you're finishing your degree in engineering, and you're like, I don't know that this is what I want to do forever. The cube, sitting CAD monkey drawings kind of thing for the rest of your career. If the idea of being out, that was what drew me to it, is I didn't want to be at a desk all the time. And so it is a lot of on the job experience learning. So if you have some basics abilities to read drawings, understand how buildings are put together, this is a good direction to look at. It's a mix of office, mix of field.
No fear of heights.
No fear of heights is preferred. An actual like of heights, actually enjoying heights is probably for the best.
I like heights until I don't.
Yeah.
I've had that I don't like heights happen to me twice before.
Yeah. As I've gotten older, I've definitely more cautious walking up to roof edges. I've been on a swing stage with a consultant, though, that literally crawled from one end of the swing stage to the other, hated heights, still could do it. He still was a consultant, but probably not as enjoyable.
Yeah, I find as my 401k gets larger, I get more and more circumspect about taking risks like heights and things like that.
So for me, one of the things that makes a good enclosure consultant is a little bit unique. It's having good spatial reasoning skills. So that's, the ability to imagine something in 3 dimensions. How different Oh, okay. I'm getting the big no from across the table here.
I'm a terrible architect. I am terrible at being able to envision things in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, but what about when you're looking at a parapet corner and you're wondering, gee, how the roof going to tie in to the weather barrier and the coping with the brick? I mean, you can visualize that in your head, how all the different pieces come together.
Yeah.
So that's spatial reasoning. You're good at it.
I've always referred to that as being able to think around corners. That's a standard for architectural detailing. It's a standard thing you need to be able to do. You have a wall section on one corner, you have a wall section on the other side of the corner, and all of that stuff is going to form as a linear extrusion, and it's all going to collide at that corner. And so you have to understand how all of that's going to work, and there better be some acknowledgement of that pending collision.
Because we're consultants, we're paid basically for our ideas. Our thoughts and our opinions. So much of our job is teaching. It's helping to explain complex issues and why something is a problem or how it might be resolved, and putting that in a clear and concise way so that people who are not experts, who are laymen, can understand the value and do their job more effectively. To me, if the idea of teaching professionally, not, in front of a classroom and bunch of students with administrators around the corner listening to you. If you like teaching, consulting's a really good fit for that sort of thing, because you're able to interact with people and explain and bring them with you towards some better state.
I've always called consulting as we're in the business of helping people who are having trouble solving a problem. We come in and we help them solve a problem they can't solve on their own. It really is, first and foremost to me, about helping people. You can be in the business you're in for a lot of reasons, but I've always considered helping people to be like the highest form of professional success. When I can walk away from a job and I know that it's a better job because I helped out, I think that's really important. I can see by the clock on the wall that I guess it's about time. So I'd like to thank you both for coming and sitting down today. I really appreciate you taking your time. I know you came from a long ways. So
thank you. It was fun being here.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Thanks again to Tom and Jessica for sharing their stories and for reminding us how valuable enclosure commissioning is to the design and construction of long-lasting buildings. Nate Sexton will be back in our next episode, joined by Tyler Gendron. Both engineers, Nate and Tyler started their SME careers as co-ops and have found their home in the Building Materials Group. Be sure to subscribe to the Build and Revitalize podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to visit www.sme-usa.com/podcast to join the conversation, access the show notes, and catch up on our previous episodes. While you're at it, connect with SME USA on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.